Hi, welcome back to Thrive Psychology. Today we are building on Monday's episode about personalization and looking at 8 different strategies from 8 different therapeutic modalities to help you reduce the blame you take for things that aren't your fault. If you've ever felt like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, this one's for you, and you may want to share it with others that you know struggle with the same thing. We're going to talk about releasing what isn't yours and helping you step into healthier, more balanced responsibility. So, tool number 1 is called the responsibility pie. When something goes wrong, it's easy to assume it's all your fault, but instead, we are going to break it down realistically. So, if we look at the example of a team project failing, we want to look at all the other factors and then assign your share last. So you only get to take what's left. So it might sound something like this. 20% we're going to assign to the colleague that didn't deliver their part. We're going to assign 30% of the unclear leadership or unrealistic deadlines to the reason that the project failed. We're going to assign 25% to external factors such as unexpected changes from the client's requests or whatever. Then you only get 25% of the pie. So the pie is 100%. You're breaking up chunks. You draw a little circle, assign chunks of the pie to everyone that played a part, and then you only get to eat or own what's left. So you can take 25% because you missed a deadline. So you don't need to feel 100% responsible. Now you only get to take 25% of the responsibility. Let's look at another example. So let's say your friend seems really distant. So you look at that as a situation, you draw a pie. We're going to say the timing and the context of trying to get together, like the circumstances, we might assign that to 30%. Maybe there's workload challenges or family challenges. So that's 30% of the reason that your friend is distant. Then we may want to assign them 50% of the pie, not to blame them, but as an explanation. They are stressed, they're withdrawing. You know your friend well. That's what they do when they're stressed. They withdraw, they say no to you, they just kind of cocoon and manage things on their own. That's what some people do. So we can say that's 50% of the pie. And then you might be able to own the 20% that's left. We already have 80% taken care of. You can take the 20% that's left and say, okay, I forgot to check in with her, and maybe I could do that to be a more supportive friend. So that might be something that you can own, but you don't want to own the whole thing. So looking at the pie really helps you to just take what part is yours and what part isn't. So you get to have your piece of the puzzle, just not the whole thing. Tool number 2 looks at accountability and absorption. So asking yourself, am I taking healthy accountability, or am I absorbing more than what is mine? So healthy accountability might be, I snapped at my partner, I need to apologize and communicate better when I'm frustrated. Absorption is they're upset, so it must all be my fault. So this distinction keeps you responsible for your actions without collapsing under the guilt of the whole situation or what is outside of your control. Okay, so then we're going to just look at tool number 3. So tool number 3 comes from IFS therapy that talks about parts from our childhood or responsibilities or roles we take on. So often the part of you that over apologizes or over functions may be a younger part that once felt responsible in your family system for keeping peace. So that child, you, may have learned, if I fix everything, I'll be safe. So practicing pausing and speaking gently, you might say to yourself, that little part of you that's still kind of struggles with being over responsible or keeping the peace or whatever, you might Notice that part and say, I see you trying to keep everyone happy, or thank you for working so hard to protect me, or it's not all on you anymore. I can take care of this now. This reframes the past and honors that part of you without letting it run the show. Okay, I'm just going to look at our next tool here. I put it on my computer instead of printing it off this time. So, okay, tool number 4 is the sphere of control. So that's an exercise that kind of mirrors therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy might have an exercise like this, and also acceptance and commitment therapy. So looking at what's in your control. So you can draw 2 circles. Inner circle, what I can control. So I can control my choices, my boundaries, my words, my actions. The outer circle is what I cannot control. So other people's moods, past mistakes, that's already done. I can't control future outcomes of things. I don't have control over the future. Don't have a crystal ball. So whenever you feel weighed down, checking in, is this in my inner circle? So is this something I can control? Or is this outside of my control in the outer circle? So if it's in the outer circle, we need to practice releasing that instead of kind of being over responsible for it. Okay? Tool number 4 is from self-compassion therapy. So mindful self-compassion has us noticing things in the moment, having a look at common humanity, other people would feel this way, and also has us being kind to ourselves. So when you notice yourself blaming, you may want to pause and say to yourself, this is a moment of frustration or suffering or sadness, whatever it is. Acknowledge that moment. So be present with that moment and acknowledge it. And then the common humanity part is, I'm not alone. Many people feel this way. And then the self-kindness, self-compassion part says, may I be kind to myself right now. So this whole practice can really interrupt self-criticism, and it instead inserts compassion. So that is really helpful, to sometimes just take a moment and be a little more self-compassionate. Okay, I may not do this again. I'm just trying to save paper. Okay, the 5th strategy is looking at, again, looking at the part of you that's kind of feeling over responsible, the part that is over functioning in responsibility, and questioning that part with a little back and forth dialogue or inner reflection or journaling. So you may want to think about and reflect on, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't take all the blame, or if you weren't over responsible? What are you afraid would happen? So often that little part of us is trying to protect us from shame or rejection. And sometimes we just need to acknowledge that and then be reassured that we're in a different place and we can manage this differently. Now, out of dialectical behavior therapy, we can do a wise mind check. So instead of our emotional mind or our rational mind, we kind of merge those together and we look at our wise mind. So when we feel overwhelmed by guilt, we might pause and acknowledge those 3 lenses. So an emotional mind would say, it's all my fault. The rational mind would say there were multiple factors. And the wise mind would say, I contributed to this, but I wasn't the only cause. Okay, so I will own my part and release the rest. And then out of narrative therapy, we can look at reframing the situation or reframing the narrative, reframing what we tell ourselves. So instead of I ruined everything, we may want to rewrite the story and say instead, I made a mistake, but I also cared deeply and tried hard. We may want to also reframe it by realizing the bigger story includes many players, not just me. So when we change the narrative, it creates space for dignity and truth, not just blame and responsibility. Okay, and the last strategy that I'm going to just scroll down to find here thank you for your patience, is just grounding ourselves in the present moment. So self blame puts us in the past. So being in the present is where our power is. That's where we live. That's what's in our control, what we do today and what we do in the future. So just grounding, like pressing your feet into the floor, right? Placing your hand on your heart, saying aloud, right now, I am safe. I'm okay. I don't need to carry all of this responsibility. I'm just going to choose what's mine to carry. Now, in closing, I want to remind you that releasing excess responsibility doesn't mean that you're shirking your part or shirking accountability. It means you're holding on to what's truly yours. So when you do, you free up your energy for growth, connection, and healing. So you can care deeply without carrying everything. Thank you so much for joining me in this series. And if you're new here today, you may want to go back to early September when we got started with cognitive distortions, because we've been doing this series for a while now. And we looked at each cognitive distortion on Mondays, and on Thursdays, I gave you strategies to overcome that cognitive distortion and start thinking with more truth, more balance, and more realistic thoughts. So I encourage you to share this and subscribe. We have lots of other topics coming up this fall. So I love that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. And thanks for your patience as I scrolled up and down today. So I want to remind you, you got this, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for being here. Bye for now.